Hello, Harry. It's Don Crothers here. I particularly value the early years we had together. I remember you were the leader when I came into the department, and I value your help and friendship at that time, and also the friendship of Elga. I know some of the guys have all these anecdotes to tell, and I'm not particularly good at those, but there's one that comes to my mind, which is when your boys were little, and one of them was having trouble saying driveway. They kept saying driveway, and I remember you telling about how you tried to teach them to say driveway, and instead it came out driveway. So, you know, it's these little personal remembrances that sort of bring back those wonderful past years. And I've, of course, have admired your science and your leadership in the department, and particularly your flair for anecdotes and public presentations. I wish I had that. Thank you.
Hi, my pleasure to read this communication from Stuart Schreiber. I too have many positive recollections, interactions with Harry when I was a graduate student here and also a colleague. But in the interest of time, we skip to Stuart's recollections. This, of course, is a wonderful opportunity for me to do my Stuart Schreiber impersonation, but I'll spare you that one. Harry Wasserman, a remembrance. Mimi, Stuart's wife, and I had lived in New Haven for about 2 years. Harry was my mentor and was holding my hand through the challenges of being an assistant professor and learning how to run a lab. He made me feel special and supported, and I needed every bit of his help. With Harry's regular input and guidance, all was going well. And then I experienced a worrisome setback of the most unexpected type. I became extremely ill. It was sudden and all-encompassing. I was lying on her sofa in a fever-fueled delirium. The first person Mim thought to call, of course, was Harry. Elga and Harry lived down the street, and Mim knew that not only would he come immediately if she called, but that he would be the one person I would trust to help me in this state. Mim called, and Harry came within minutes. He literally picked me up and carried me down the stairs. And Stuart's a fairly large guy. He loaded me into his car, which was double parked outside, and we all drove to the hospital. I eventually responded to IV fluids and medications and was sent home late that night. Harry waited the whole time with Mim and drove both of us home. He stayed to make sure we were both okay. He rescued me and comforted Mim. It took many months to regain a substantial portion of my strength and several years to regain my health fully. I had dodged a bullet. This story illustrates the kind of person Harry was. Loving, kind, compassionate. He asked no questions. He didn't hesitate. He showed up, he did the job, and he made us both feel loved and well taken care of with his calm and smile. He continued to be that way towards me for the rest of his life. I am certain everyone else here has a similar story about Harry. Thank you.
In this handout, there's a small story entitled Pea Soup, and it doesn't give you the whole story, but it's sort of Mike's version, and my recollection was slightly different, but those small details really don't matter. Harry was not a guy to brook people who were pompous, let's put it that way. And there was a restaurant downtown, now defunct on Upper Chapel Street, known as Rotisserie Normand, okay, who had a rather pompous head waiter by the name of Armand. So Harry was there with a group of his colleagues, or industrialists, I don't know what version you want, but in any case, we're all gathered around the table, and of course, the soup du jour on Wednesday evening, or what it was always pea soup. So Harry clued in his guests about this, and signaled to the waiter, or the maitre d', sorry, and Armand would come over, and yes, Professor. And Harry would say, Armand, so what is the soup du jour for the evening? The soup du jour, potage Saint-Germain. And to a person around the table, I'll have the pea soup, I'll have the pea soup. So much out of the story. My daughters just hate it, because anytime we would go out to dinner as a family, and I looked out and the wait person said to me, "Oh, soup du jour? Pea soup." You know? So they would constantly be kicking me under the table not to tell the story. Well, I got even with them one time. Harry and Elga were living over on Bishop Street and had just moved to Hampton to a condo. And there's a restaurant across the street called the Playwright. So there I am, sitting with my wife, facing the door. My two daughters are on the opposite side of the table with their backs to the door. And the wait person comes over, and she said, I asked her, I said, "So what's the soup du jour?" I said, "Oh, we have two choices this evening. Potato leek soup, which is always very good, warm vichyssoise, right? And pea soup." Immediately, my shins start bleeding. I besieged my heels from every direction. And I say to and at that moment, believe me, in the door walked Harry and Elga. And I say to my one daughter, I said, "Okay, I will not tell the pea soup story. Harry." Another thing that I remember Harry would do all the time is he would walk up to somebody and he would go like this. "What a grip, what a grip." Or another one for young children. So, talk to some youngster. "So how old are you?"
9.
"You're 9? Why, when I was your age, I was already 10. All right, so I have to push the button. So, while I was teaching, I had a huge website for the organic chemistry class after Harry got finished doing it for many, many years. And I put together a huge section on carbohydrates. And in amongst all the slides, whoops, what did I
Did we not save it?
not save it. Come on,
He
Brian.
introduced this to me during the coffee hour. I thought I'd put it in.
Proposed it, you.
It's gone.
Too bad it's done. Wait, they can start. So Elga and Harry would know the story. This is one that Harry told about Woodward in his early days when Harry was in his lab. Allegedly, Woodward came in with a piece of paper to the lab and said, "Gentlemen and lady," I guess Elga was there. "Gentlemen, here's the opportunity of a lifetime. $1,000 reward to synthesize sucrose. Why, all you have to do is hook two molecules together of glucose and lose water, and you've got $1,000. And one of the wags, who I believe was Flash George, right? In the lab said, "Yes, Professor. And if you make it that way, you get $2,000. Because it's fructose and glucose. All right.
You have heard about the many achievements of Harry Wasserman in organic chemistry and also about his talents as an artist and as a musician. I'm going to tell you about his contributions to what you might call the sociology of our department. Harry was enthusiastic, outgoing, and friendly in a way that affected all of us. Since I have been here, the spirit of our department has been excellent. We support and help each other in many ways. There have been many collaborations among faculty here on scientific projects. The results have led to a great number of joint publications. I do not know of another department where this is so. I'm sure that Harry's enthusiasm and positive spirit have influenced us a great deal to lead to these results. I am also sure that his positive personality was a major factor in the great success and popularity of his large undergraduate course in organic chemistry over several decades. Personally, I am extremely grateful to Harry and Elga for introducing me to Lola 32 years ago. We have been happily married ever since. Now, you might imagine that the attitudes I described for Yale were normal at all universities. Let me tell you a story related to that point. Harry and Elga and I all did graduate work and received our PhDs under the supervision of R.B. Woodward at Harvard. In my opinion, Woodward was the greatest organic chemist of the 20th century. Most organic chemists around the world would agree with that assessment. You might imagine that Woodward should have had an easy time being promoted at Harvard. He had shown brilliance from the very beginning of his career. However, when he came up for tenure, the senior chemistry professors met and voted. The vote was negative. They did not recommend Woodward's promotion. Well, but you all know that he spent his entire career at Harvard until he died. How did that happen? Fortunately for Woodward and for Harvard, the president of the university at that time was James Bryant Conant, an eminent organic chemist. He knew very well about Woodward's accomplishments and his enormous promise. Through his efforts, Woodward was given tenure in spite of the vote of the chemistry department. Why did the chemists vote against Woodward? It seems incomprehensible to us. I am fairly sure that this happened because of the efforts of Lou Fieser, who was the best-known organic chemist at Harvard at the time. He was the co-author of the well-known organic textbook Fieser and Fieser, or as we used to call it, Caesar and Squeezer. He did not get along with Woodward. I think Woodward did not show him the proper respect. The feelings between them were mutual. I believe that nothing like this could ever have happened at Yale. The spirit exemplified by Harry Wasserman would not have permitted it. Let me tell you one more thing I remember about Harry. Our great theoretical chemist, Lars Ansager, always seemed to fall asleep at the beginning of every lecture that he attended. But he was famous for waking up at the end and asking a profound question, which the speaker often didn't understand. I never saw Harry doze off at a lecture. In contrast, I always saw him apparently taking careful notes, no matter what was the subject. One time, I was near him and I looked over his shoulder and discovered that what he was actually doing was drawing an exquisite sketch of somebody in the audience. Harry contributed tremendously to our department and we miss him very much.
Hello everyone, I'm Jerry Burson and I'm honored to join you in this remembrance of Harry Wasserman, with thanks to the videographic skills of Flo McBride and the portly skills of Mike. Much of what I say will be taken from a biographical memoir written by myself and our former colleague Sam Danishevsky, with the help of members of the Wasserman family. Harry and I had next-door offices in Sterling Chemistry Lab for 40 years. During that time, I was privileged to observe the development of exciting new fields from his research. As you all know, he won international recognition as a research chemist. Today, however, I want to examine briefly his historic role in the development of modern chemistry at Yale. Research and teaching here in the immediate post-war period were particularly strong in physical chemistry, as exemplified in the work of on the physical properties of ionic solutions, led by John Gamble Kirkwood and Lars Ansager. Organic chemistry, however, had lost the leadership of Treat Baldwin Johnson, who died in 1947. The department needed rebuilding. New strength was added to the organic faculty with the acquisition of William von Eggers-Doering from Columbia University in 1952, and a decade later, Kenneth Burl Weiberg, a former Doering student, then at the University of Washington. That adds a human touch, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Although Harry's first position at Yale was as instructor of chemistry, by 1962 he was a full professor, his leadership qualities were becoming evident, and he had become chairman of the chemistry department. And he was instrumental in recruiting Weiberg, who became a close friend. In the period of sturdy growth that followed, both of them contributed decisive insights to the choice of active new colleagues and hence to the overall direction of the department's activities. Harry's work as a teacher was brilliant. His knowledge, wit, and showmanship made his organic chemistry lectures one of the most popular science courses on campus. In 1960, Harry became American editor of the Pergamon Press Tetrahedron Letters, a journal for rapid publication of new research findings in organic chemistry. He worked closely with Pergamon's leader, Ian, later Robert Maxwell. The honorary founding editors were Sir Robert Robinson and Harry's mentor, Robert Burns Woodward. Harry served in that post for 38 years, 1960 to 1998, during which time, it has been estimated, some 10,000 articles had passed through his office in the third floor of the Sterling Lab. They were given careful examination, and if found deserving, sent off to the press. In cases of disagreement between authors and referees, Harry often found ways to resolve the conflict constructively by suggesting modifications that would satisfy both sides. He was a peacemaker who used such situations as teaching moments. He was among the first to provide for graphic illustrations in the abstracts at the top of each paper, thereby giving the viewer an instantaneous clue to the relevance of the work to the reader's own interests. Harry was unique. I've never met anyone with his range of accomplishment in science, the arts, and music. Many of you know that he taught himself to play clarinet and that he was a stalwart of the jazz group called the Gloom Exterminators. One of his admirers was his friend Bernie Chait, himself a well-known painter and a professor of fine arts at Yale. In fact, watching Harry produce his glowing watercolor paintings with such seeming ease inspired me to sign up for a watercolor class at the Hamden High School Adult Education Program. But no, the teacher told me that first I had to take a drawing class, which I did. At the end of the term, I approached the teacher and asked again for admission to watercolors. Again, no. She said that I should repeat the drawing class. So I flunked, or as we used to call it, got left back. Apparently, despite Harry's shining example, I had no future in the graphic arts. Harry was a multi-talented, charming man, a master storyteller, a warm, generous friend, and a leader who will be sorely missed.
In the fall of 1960, I got a call from Harry. I had met him before, but didn't know him well. But he invited me to come to Yale and consider accepting a position here. He gave me a good sales talk, even though I've been very happy in Seattle for 10 years, and I didn't think it would move. But he convinced me to come, and he spent a lot of time talking about his vision for the department, about a new research building, Klein Lab, which had been approved, and best of all, necessary funds had come. And with reception that Yale chemistry that had a potential of being one of the best in the country. It was hard to be affected by enthusiasm, and he was clearly an exceptional person. So I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and finally decided maybe it was a good move. Marge was not as enthusiastic, but she went along with it. And I told Harry that we would come in 1962. Well, we had planned a sabbatical leave. And so in 1961, we took off for Germany to spend a year in the Rudolf Krieg's Institute in Karlsruhe. Spent the year, 61, 62 years, as an unemployed chemist. Fortunately, had a Guggenheim grant and a Sloan Fellowship, so that we had food on that table for that year. And in 62, returned, and I started my position at Yale. We were only received, especially by Helga and Harry. My students started arriving in New Haven to continue their work and watch the construction of the new Klein chemistry building. An early problem appeared. Harry had promised that my students would get full credit for their cumulatives. Well, Dean John Perry Miller of the graduate school, which some of you may remember, he was a formidable person. He was one that you would say knew who he was. In his office, he had a chart which had names of universities and names under each category. There was one in red, one in blue, and all the rest were in black. I guess you could figure out which one was which, but he was very much into where we stood. Well, he didn't think very much of students from the University of Washington. No, they're not Yale students. So he said, well, grudgingly, he'd give us half credit. I didn't like that. And Harry, because he had promised me that we'd get full credit, wanted to do something about it. Unfortunately, Harry had to go to Europe for a conference. They could have hold of Bill During and said, you take care of it. Somehow, Bill During did take care of it, and it was all okay. The department had a lot of run-ins with this dean. And in exasperation one time, he says, you DuPont boys. He couldn't think of anything worse to call us. But Harry usually got his way, and he became King of Brewster's director of Division of Physical Sciences, so I guess the administration must have thought he was pretty good. After a few years, Bill During told us that he was leaving for Harvard, and shortly thereafter, Harry and I got together, and we thought about who we might try to get in the department, and we both agreed that the person we both would most like is Jerry Burson. Now, we realized that there was a real problem here. He had just moved from USC to Wisconsin, recently had done that, and, moving is a pain. So we said, how are we going to get it? But Harry persisted. And with his usual charm and, salesmanship, he was able to convince Jerry to come. One thing that helped that the university also agreed that we could try to hire Ian Scott when he came. And so with that and with Mike McBride and Fred Ziegler coming into the department, we sort of looked like a good chemistry department in 1960. So that was very promising. Now, the department did have some strength in other areas, like Lars Ansager, Ray Fuas, and physical chemistry, Dick Wolfgang, chemical physics, Ray Wan and physical chemistry, but there was a need for much more. And Harry strongly supported moving in the direction of modern inorganic chemistry. Jack Fowler and Bob Crabtree, strengthened chemical physics, adding Steve Colson and Al Smith, who not here any longer, but did good things for us, and an X-ray crystallographer, Rick Adams. And all these had done very well, and all the later appointments in these areas have also done well. And so his ideas have done quite well for this department. Now, Harry had real style. He was a man for all occasions. If we needed someone to give a welcoming address, we asked him. If we had need for support or understanding, we went to Harry. If we thought there was a potential problem in the department, we talked to Harry first. Harry was always available and always very charming. He's a first-class scientist, evidenced by his election at National Academy of Sciences. And as several people have mentioned, he was the notable editor of Tetrahedral Letters. And this combination of his science and his work in Tetrahedral Letters did raise the standing of the department in a large amount. It really helped. In all of these areas, he brought increased recognition, and in addition, as been mentioned before, he was a great artist. Many of us have some of his watercolors, and I consider them to be some of my prized sessions. He's a very good musician, as been mentioned. This Boom Busters included Lars Hansager on the one-string bass, and when Ian Scott was here, he was on saxophone. For a while, it looked like the requirement for becoming a faculty member was that you be a musician. I felt very lucky that my office was adjacent to those of Harry and Jerry. We had many good conversations. We usually had similar ideas, and I dearly missed Harry. I missed him when he and Elliot moved to Lexington, Massachusetts, and I still do miss him now.